There is a message traveling through space right now with your address on it. And I don't mean your street or your city or even your country. I mean something far more precise and far more permanent than any of those things. A message encoded in gold and mathematics and the exact frequency of hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. A cosmic calling card that says, here, right here, this exact location, this specific star, this small wet rock orbiting it, this is where we are. Come find us. And that message was launched before most of you listening to me tonight were even born. And it is out there right now, hurtling through the pitch black void between stars at 40,000 kilometers per hour. And we cannot call it back. We cannot turn it off. We cannot apologize. We cannot explain that we didn't fully understand what we were doing when we did it. Because the universe doesn't accept apologies. The universe doesn't care about intentions. The universe only cares about one thing. And tonight, together, you and I are going to find out exactly what that one thing is. And I promise you, by the time we are done, the night sky will never look the same to you again. My name is MK, and tonight we are going somewhere that most people, sensible people, comfortable people who prefer their sleep undisturbed, refuse to go. Not because this place is hard to find, not because the evidence is scarce or the trail has gone cold, but because this particular rabbit hole leads to an idea so vast, so cold, so fundamentally reorienting to the human psyche that the scientists who have stared directly into it have described the experience not as enlightenment, but as something closer to vertigo, a feeling of the ground dropping away beneath your feet, a feeling that the comfortable story you have been told about our place in the cosmos, the story where humanity is special, the story where the silence of space is just a matter of distance and time, the story where our radio broadcasts and golden records are the hopeful opening lines of a beautiful interstellar friendship. That entire story is not just incomplete, it is catastrophically, lethally wrong. And the truth that replaces it is something the mainstream will not tell you, something the textbooks gloss over with optimistic language and careful euphemisms, something that most scientists who understand it prefer to discuss only in hushed tones among colleagues who have also already lost their ability to look at the night sky with innocent wonder. And that truth has a name, and the name is the dark forest, and you and I are going to walk straight into it tonight. Before we go any further, I need you to leave a comment right now telling me where you are watching from tonight, what time it is in your corner of the world, because I record these videos late, alone, with nothing but darkness outside my window and the quiet hum of equipment around me, and something about knowing you are out there, in your bed or your chair, in the soft shadows of your room. Something about knowing we are moving through this together makes the journey feel less like falling and more like exploring. So leave a comment. Tell me you are here, because what we are about to discuss is the kind of thing that should not be confronted alone. Now let's begin where all the horror begins, with a golden record and a very reasonable, very human, very catastrophically misguided idea. It is 1977, and Carl Sagan is sitting in a room with some of the brightest minds on the planet, and they are doing something that has never been done before in the history of our species. They are assembling a message to the universe, a greeting, a gift, a declaration of existence, and they are doing it with tremendous care and tremendous love, because Carl Sagan loved humanity the way some people love a child, with that specific aching tenderness that comes from seeing something you know is fragile and beautiful and doomed and loving it anyway. And so, the Voyager Golden Record that they assembled is extraordinary. It contains 115 images of Earth and its life forms. It contains greetings in 55 human languages. It contains the sounds of surf and wind and rain and thunder, the sounds of birds and whales and the human heartbeat. It contains 90 minutes of music from cultures across the world, Bach and Beethoven and Chuck Berry and Blind Willie Johnson. It contains the brainwaves of a woman in love, and it contains something that the team considered the most important element of all: a precise map, a pulsar map, a diagram using the positions of 14 known pulsars to identify the exact location of our solar system in the Milky Way galaxy. A cosmic coordinate system so precise that any sufficiently advanced civilization that found the record would be able to pinpoint our exact location in space with perfect accuracy. And they sent 2 of these records on 2 separate probes into the void. And both probes are still out there right now, and the records are still attached to them, and the map is still readable, and the coordinates are still correct. And I need you to sit with that for a moment, because what I just described to you is not a greeting. It is not a love letter to the cosmos. What I just described to you is a treasure map, and we are the treasure. But the Golden Record was not the only time we shouted into the void, not even close, because in 1974, a message was broadcast from the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, a massive radio telescope, a dish so large it was built into a natural depression in the mountains. And the message they sent was a binary encoded signal containing information about our DNA, our solar system, the chemicals of life, and the population of Earth, transmitted directly toward a cluster of stars 25,000 light years away. And this was done with great fanfare and celebration. This was done as a demonstration of human technological achievement. This was done as an act of cosmic optimism. And I want you to understand something about these acts, these golden records, and these radio transmissions, and the decades of radio and television broadcasts that have been leaking into space since the 1920s. These signals that carry the voices of Hitler and Churchill and the first moon landing, and every television show and radio program ever broadcast, all of it spreading outward from Earth at the speed of light in an ever-expanding sphere of electromagnetic noise. I want you to understand that the people who did these things were not reckless. They were not stupid. They were, in fact, some of the most intelligent human beings who have ever lived. And they did these things because they were operating from a very specific assumption, an assumption so deeply embedded in the human psyche that questioning it feels almost like blasphemy. And that assumption is this: that other intelligent life, if it exists, would be friendly, that intelligence and wisdom and benevolence go hand in hand, that a civilization advanced enough to receive our signals would be advanced enough to have moved past violence and conquest and survival at any cost, that the universe, in other words, is fundamentally kind. And tonight, I'm going to show you exactly why that assumption, that beautiful, hopeful, deeply human assumption, may be the most dangerous idea our species has ever held. Here is the question that everything else tonight depends on. The question that a Hungarian-American physicist named Enrico Fermi asked at a lunch table in Los Alamos in 1950. A question so simple and so devastating that it has haunted physics and astronomy and philosophy for the 75 years since he asked it. And the question is this: where is everybody? Because if you do the math, if you sit down with the actual numbers that astronomers have given us about the size and age of the universe, numbers that have only grown more staggering with each passing decade of observation, if you sit down with those numbers and you work through the probability of intelligent life existing elsewhere, you arrive at a conclusion so overwhelming, so mathematically undeniable, that the universe should be absolutely teeming with it, overflowing with it, should be practically impossible to look anywhere in the night sky without seeing evidence of it. And yet, and this is the part that keeps cosmologists awake at night, and this is the part that the mainstream will never quite explain to your satisfaction, the part they wave away with vague talk of distance and time and the difficulty of detection. The universe is completely, utterly, profoundly, disturbingly, impossibly silent, and I want you to truly understand why that silence is so strange, because the scale of the cosmos that it contradicts is something the human brain was simply not designed to comprehend. There are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, 2 trillion, each one containing on average 100 billion stars, each of those stars potentially hosting planets, and our own galaxy alone, the Milky Way, contains between 100 and 400 billion stars, and the Milky Way is 13 billion years old, which means there are stars in our own galaxy that formed when the universe was young, stars that had billions of years of head start on our own sun. And if even a small fraction of those ancient stars hosted planets, and if even a tiny percentage of those planets developed life, and if even a sliver of that life eventually developed intelligence, and if that intelligence developed technology even remotely similar to ours, then by now, right now, tonight, as you lie in the dark, listening to my voice, there should be civilizations out there that are not thousands of years ahead of us, not millions of years ahead of us, but billions of years ahead of us. Civilizations so old that they were ancient before the Earth even formed. Civilizations that have had billions of years to spread across the galaxy, to build megastructures visible from across the cosmos, to modify stars, to engineer planets, to do things so far beyond our comprehension that we wouldn't even have a framework for understanding what we were looking at if we saw it. And we should be seeing it. We should be unable to avoid seeing it. And yet, when we point our most powerful telescopes at the sky, when we listen with our most sensitive radio receivers, when we scan for the infrared signatures of Dyson spheres and the gamma radiation of impossible engines and all the other technological fingerprints that a billion-year-old civilization would necessarily leave on the universe, we find nothing. We hear nothing. The cosmos returns our gaze with a silence so complete and so uniform that it feels almost deliberate. And that feeling, that instinct that the silence is deliberate, that is what we are going to follow tonight, deep into the dark forest, all the way to the truth. The mainstream will tell you that the Fermi Paradox has comfortable solutions. They will tell you that life is simply rarer than we think, that the development of intelligence requires such a specific and unlikely chain of events, that we may simply be alone or nearly alone in the cosmos. They will tell you about the great filter, the idea that there is some catastrophic barrier somewhere in the development of life or intelligence that most civilizations never survive. They will tell you about the difficulties of interstellar travel and the vast distances between stars and the impossibility of communication across such gulfs of space and time. They will give you these answers, and they will present them with confidence and with footnotes and with peer-reviewed papers. And I am not saying these answers are wrong. I am not saying the mathematics behind them is flawed, but I am saying that they are all, every single one of them, fundamentally incomplete, because they all share the same assumption, the same comfortable anthropocentric assumption that the reason we don't see other civilizations is because they are not there or not capable of reaching us. And none of them, not one of the mainstream solutions to the Fermi Paradox, adequately addresses the possibility that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The possibility that the silence is not an absence but a behavior, that the civilizations are out there, that they are ancient beyond comprehension, that they know exactly where we are, and that they are deliberately silent for reasons that, once you understand them, will make the silence feel not like loneliness, but like a warning. There is a forest at the edge of every human nightmare, and you know this forest. You have always known it because you have felt it in the oldest part of your brain, that reptilian corridor of pure survival instinct that evolution carved into you over millions of years. You have felt it on the edge of sleep when a sound outside your window makes every muscle in your body go rigid and still. You have felt it on a road at night when the headlights illuminate only what is directly ahead and the darkness on either side could contain anything at all. And what your body does in those moments, what that ancient survival machinery does before your conscious mind has even processed what is happening, is that it goes silent, it freezes, it stops broadcasting, because something in the deepest and most fundamental code of every creature that has ever survived long enough to pass its genes forward understood a truth that took human philosophy millennia to articulate. And that truth is this: in a dark forest, the thing that makes noise dies, and the thing that stays silent lives. And tonight, I need you to hold that truth in your mind, and I need you to scale it up. I need you to take that feeling, that primal freeze response, that ancient instinct to go dark and go quiet and go still, and I need you to apply it not to a forest at the edge of a road at night, but to the entire universe, 2 trillion galaxies, 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone, billions of years of cosmic time. And I need you to ask yourself what it means, what it truly means, if the silence of the cosmos is not emptiness, but is instead the sound of 2 trillion galaxies worth of intelligent life, all doing exactly what your body does when it hears a sound in the dark, going still, going silent, going dark, because something out there made them understand that in this forest, in this incomprehensibly vast and ancient and lightless forest, the thing that makes noise dies. This is the dark forest theory, and it was articulated most completely by the Chinese science fiction author Liu Cixin in his trilogy that begins with the three-body problem, though Liu himself would tell you and has told interviewers that he did not invent the idea so much as he gave it a name and a narrative shape, because the logic underneath it, the cold and terrible logic that drives it, is not fiction. It is not speculation. It is mathematics. It is game theory. It is the same ruthless calculation that governs every predator-prey relationship that has ever existed on this planet, scaled up to a size that makes the mind go quiet with something that is not quite fear and not quite awe, but lives in the narrow and very uncomfortable territory between them. And Liu calls it Cosmic Sociology, and he builds it from two axioms, two foundational premises that are so simple and so reasonable that you will find yourself nodding along with them before you realize that together, combined, they lead to a conclusion so monstrous that part of your brain will refuse to accept it, even as the rest of it recognizes with horrible clarity that the logic is sound. Axiom 1 is this: survival is the primary need of every civilization. And I want you to notice how uncontroversial that sounds, how obvious, how almost boring. Because of course, survival is the primary need of every civilization, of every species, of every individual organism that has ever existed. The entire history of life on Earth is nothing but the story of organisms competing to survive, and we have no reason whatsoever to believe that this would be any different for life elsewhere in the cosmos. We have no evidence, none at all, that intelligence somehow transcends or overrides the survival imperative. And in fact, the opposite seems to be true. The more intelligent a species becomes, the more elaborate and sophisticated its survival strategies become. The more tools it builds, the more territory it claims, the more resources it accumulates, all in service of that one foundational drive: survive. And Liu's first axiom simply states that this is universal, that any civilization we might encounter in the cosmos, no matter how ancient, no matter how technologically advanced, is still at its core operating from this same imperative, still asking itself the same question that the first single-celled organisms were asking 3 billion years ago on this planet: how do I continue to exist? Axiom 2 is this: civilizations will continuously grow and expand, but the total resources in the universe are finite. And again, notice how reasonable this sounds. Notice how it matches everything we know about the behavior of life on Earth. Notice how every civilization in human history has expanded until it met a boundary it could not cross. Notice how we are doing it right now, pushing against the boundaries of our own planet, looking at the moon and Mars and the asteroid belt with the hungry eyes of a species that has always needed more than it currently has. And Liu simply extends this observation to its logical cosmic conclusion that any civilization, given enough time and enough technological development, will eventually consume the resources available to it and need to expand further, and that the universe, for all its unimaginable size, contains a finite amount of matter and energy, which means that at some point, at some scale, the expansion of one civilization necessarily comes at the expense of another. These two axioms, survival as the primary drive and resource competition as the inevitable result, are the foundation of the dark forest. And on their own, they do not yet lead anywhere truly frightening, because you might say, quite reasonably, that surely advanced civilizations could cooperate, could share resources, could develop technologies that make resource competition obsolete, could transcend the zero-sum game of survival through wisdom and compassion, and the kind of enlightened self-interest that recognizes cooperation as more efficient than conflict. And this is the hope. This is the comfortable answer. This is what Carl Sagan believed, and what the makers of the Golden Record believed, and what every optimistic vision of interstellar contact has always assumed: that intelligence and wisdom go together, that a civilization old enough to cross the stars is a civilization that has solved the problem of violence. And this hope is beautiful, and I understand why you want it to be true, and I want you to hold on to it for just a moment longer, because what comes next is what destroys it. There is something called the chain of suspicion, and it is the engine that drives everything in the dark forest, the mechanism that takes two reasonable axioms about survival and resources and grinds them into something that produces, with mathematical inevitability, a conclusion that feels like something you read in a nightmare and spent the rest of the day trying to shake. And the chain of suspicion works like this. Imagine two civilizations, Civilization A and Civilization B, and let's be generous. Let's say both of them are genuinely peaceful, genuinely cooperative, genuinely committed to the idea that communication and sharing and mutual flourishing are better strategies than conflict and conquest. Let's give them every virtue we could hope for. And now, let's introduce one single constraint, the most unavoidable constraint in the universe: the speed of light. Because in the cosmos, information travels at the speed of light and no faster, which means that any communication between two civilizations separated by even modest interstellar distances takes years or decades or centuries to complete a single exchange, which means that Civilization A can never know in real time what Civilization B is doing, and Civilization B can never know in real time what Civilization A is doing. And this is not a technological problem that can be solved with better equipment. It is a fundamental physical constraint baked into the structure of reality itself, and it creates a situation of permanent, irreducible, inescapable uncertainty. So Civilization A detects Civilization B. Let's say they pick up a radio signal, something like the signals we have been broadcasting for 100 years. And Civilization A has to make a decision about what to do with this information. And here is where the mathematics becomes brutal, because Civilization A cannot know if Civilization B is peaceful or hostile, cannot know because the speed of light makes real-time communication impossible. And even if Civilization B sends a message saying, "We are peaceful, we mean you no harm, we want to be friends," Civilization A cannot verify that claim, cannot know if it is true, if it is a deception, cannot know if Civilization B will still be peaceful in 1,000 years when the first physical contact might occur. Because civilizations change, they grow, they evolve, they experience revolutions and upheavals and catastrophes that transform their values and their intentions in ways that no message from 1,000 years ago could predict. And here is the darkest part. Here is the thing that made me sit back from my desk when I first understood it. Civilization A cannot even know if Civilization B is currently capable of threatening Civilization A, because the signal they detected might be thousands of years old, might represent a civilization that was primitive when the signal was sent, but has had thousands of years since then to develop technologies of unimaginable destructive power. And by the time Civilization A could send a response and receive a reply and gather enough information to make any kind of informed judgment, centuries might have passed. And in centuries, as we are about to discuss, everything can change. Think about our own civilization for a moment. Think about what we were 2,000 years ago. Think about Rome at the height of its power. Think about how sophisticated and advanced Roman civilization seemed to Romans. They had roads and aqueducts and a legal system and architectural achievements that still inspire awe. And now, think about what we have today. Think about nuclear weapons and genetic engineering and artificial intelligence and spacecraft that have left the solar system. Think about how incomprehensible all of that would be to a Roman citizen, how completely beyond their framework of understanding. And that transformation happened in 2,000 years, which in cosmic time is not even a rounding error. It is less than a single second in a year. It is nothing. It is the blink of an eye of a creature that lives for 1 billion years. And this means that from the perspective of a civilization operating on cosmic timescales, any civilization they encounter, no matter how primitive it appears, is a potential existential threat. Because given a few thousand years, a species that is building its first iron tools could develop the capacity to destroy stars, and you cannot wait to find out which way it goes, because by the time you know, it might be too late. This is what Liu calls the technological explosion, the recognition that civilizations can transform their capabilities so rapidly on cosmic timescales that any assessment of their threat level based on current observations is essentially meaningless. And when you combine the technological explosion with the chain of suspicion and the fundamental impossibility of verified communication across interstellar distances, you arrive at a conclusion that the game theorists among you will recognize as the dominant strategy in a scenario with these parameters. And the dominant strategy is not cooperation. The dominant strategy is not caution. The dominant strategy is not reaching out with golden records and radio greetings and signals encoded in the frequency of hydrogen. The dominant strategy, the only strategy that guarantees survival in a universe governed by these rules, is silence, is darkness, is the absolute, total, permanent concealment of your existence from every other entity in the cosmos. And if detection despite concealment becomes inevitable, if you discover that another civilization has found you or is about to find you, the dominant strategy becomes something far more terrible than silence. I want you to imagine that you are a hunter, not a modern hunter with a rifle and a truck and a map of the terrain, but a hunter in the deep prehistoric sense, a hunter in a forest at midnight, no light, no landmarks, no way of knowing what else is in the forest with you, and you are armed because you have always been armed, because in this forest, the unarmed do not survive, and you have been moving silently through the dark for a very long time, and then you hear something, a sound, a branch snapping, a voice, a light flickering between the trees, and you must make a decision, and you must make it without any information about what made that sound, without any way of communicating with it safely, without any way of verifying its intentions, without any time to gather more data. Because in the time it might take you to approach cautiously and assess the situation and attempt to communicate, whatever is over there might be assessing you, might be approaching you, might be making its own calculation about what to do about the sound you made, and the mathematics of survival in this situation, the cold and terrible mathematics, say that you cannot afford to wait, because if you wait and it is hostile, you are dead. But if you act immediately, you have a chance. And so the hunter acts And the hunter does not act by revealing themselves or by calling out a greeting or by hoping for the best. The hunter acts by eliminating the source of the sound before the source of the sound can eliminate them. Now scale that up. Scale it up from a forest to a galaxy. Scale it up from a hunter with a spear to a civilization with technologies we cannot even conceptualize. Scale it up from a single night to billions of years of accumulated survival strategy. And tell me, with the chain of suspicion and the technological explosion and the impossibility of verified communication all operating simultaneously, tell me what the rational move is for a civilization that detects another civilization's existence. Tell me why, given these parameters, the answer would be anything other than what the hunter does in the dark forest. Tell me why a billion-year-old civilization, a civilization that has survived long enough to develop technologies we can barely imagine, a civilization that has been through everything the cosmos can throw at an intelligent species and has come out the other side still existing. Tell me why that civilization would look at the risk calculation and conclude that the safe move, the smart move, the move that keeps them alive for another billion years, is anything other than immediate, decisive, total elimination of the detected civilization before it can become a threat. The answer, according to the dark forest theory, is that it wouldn't, that it doesn't, that the civilizations out there in the abyss who have survived long enough to be dangerous have survived precisely because they internalize this logic so completely and so early that it has become not just strategy, but instinct, not just policy, but nature, that every civilization in this cosmos that has made it past a certain threshold of age and capability is a silent hunter moving through the dark with its finger on a trigger that could sterilize a planet from a distance measured in light years. And they are not doing this because they are evil. They are doing it because the mathematics of survival in the dark forest leave no other viable option. They are doing it for the same reason your immune system destroys foreign cells without stopping to determine whether those cells have families or feelings or dreams. Because in the calculus of survival, certainty of safety outweighs every other consideration, and the only way to be certain is to eliminate the uncertainty at its source. This is the dark forest. This is the silence explained. Not emptiness, not loneliness, patience, discipline, the collective, coordinated, galaxy-spanning silence of every intelligent civilization that has ever survived long enough to understand the rules of the game they are playing. All of them moving through the dark without a sound. All of them listening with instruments we cannot imagine for the first hint of noise from any direction. All of them ready, all of them waiting, all of them absolutely, completely, terrifyingly silent. I need you to think about what you had for breakfast this morning, or whatever small, ordinary, unremarkable thing you did today without thinking about it. The coffee you made, or the shower you took, or the route you drove without looking at the map. Because you have driven it so many times, it lives in your hands now. I need you to think about the texture of your ordinary day, the comfortable, predictable, blessedly mundane fabric of your existence. And I need you to hold that feeling of normalcy, of safety, of a world that operates according to rules you understand, and a future that extends forward from today in a more or less predictable direction. I need you to hold it very carefully, like something fragile, like something made of glass, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change the texture of that feeling permanently, not in a way that will ruin your life. I promise you that. I promise you that by the time we reach the end of tonight's journey, you will sleep. You will sleep deeply and peacefully, and with a comfort you did not expect to find on the other side of this darkness. But before we get there, we have to go through the part that is genuinely, historically, cosmically terrifying. And that part is this. For approximately 100 years, our civilization has been doing the one thing that the dark forest theory identifies as the single most dangerous act an intelligent species can commit. We have been making noise. We have been making extraordinary, enthusiastic, completely unambiguous noise. We have been broadcasting our existence to the entire galaxy with the energetic confidence of a species that has never once considered the possibility that the universe might not be safe. It started as so many things in the 20th century started, with something that felt like pure triumph, pure human ingenuity asserting itself against the indifferent void. It started with radio, with Marconi and Tesla, and the first crackling transmissions that carried human voices through the air as electromagnetic waves. And nobody in those early days was thinking about deep space. Nobody was imagining that these signals would escape the atmosphere and keep traveling. But that is exactly what they do, because electromagnetic radiation does not stop at the edge of our atmosphere. It does not politely contain itself to the surface of our planet. It keeps going, outward at the speed of light, expanding in a sphere that gets larger with every passing second. And since the first powerful radio transmissions in the early 20th century, that sphere has been growing. And right now, tonight, as you lie in your bed listening to my voice, there is a bubble of electromagnetic noise surrounding our solar system, a bubble that contains every radio broadcast and television signal and radar pulse and military transmission our civilization has produced for the last 100 years. A bubble that at this moment is approximately 200 light years across. And inside that bubble, if you had the right instruments and you were looking from anywhere within it, you would be able to detect unmistakably and without any ambiguity the existence of an intelligent, technological civilization on the third planet of an unremarkable star in the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. We didn't just whisper, we screamed. Think about what is inside that bubble. Think about the contents of a century of human broadcasting, because it is not just static, it is not just noise, it is information, rich and detailed, and revealing information about everything we are. Hitler's speeches broadcast across Europe in the 1930s, traveling outward into space. The first television signals carrying flickering black and white images of human faces and human bodies and human cities outward into the void. The radar pulses from the Second World War, bouncing off aircraft and continuing past them into the cosmos. The communications of the Cold War, the moon landing broadcast to the world, and beyond it, decades of television programming, decades of military communications, decades of satellite signals and cellular networks, and all the other electromagnetic noise of a species in the middle of a technological explosion. All of it spreading outward at the speed of light. All of it readable to any sufficiently advanced civilization with the instruments to detect it. And the thing that I cannot stop thinking about, the thing that crawled into my mind when I first truly understood it and has never quite left is that we had no choice about the earlier transmissions. The people who made them had no idea they were doing anything dangerous. They were just using the technology they had developed, just living their lives, just broadcasting their music and their news and their arguments and their love stories into an atmosphere they thought would contain them. But we know now, we have known for decades, and we keep doing it. We keep broadcasting, we keep expanding the bubble, we keep making the noise louder and more complex and more unmistakably the product of an intelligent species, and the dark forest is listening. There is a specific flavor of horror that comes from innocence, from looking back at something you did without understanding and realizing the danger you were in. The way a child might laugh about playing near a cliff edge, only years later understanding that one wrong step would have ended everything. And that is the flavor of horror I feel when I think about the Arecibo Message, because the Arecibo Message was sent in 1974 as a demonstration of human technological achievement. It was a celebration. It was a flex. It was humanity saying, look at us. Look at what we can do. Look at how far we have come. And the message was broadcast directly toward a globular star cluster called Messier 13, a cluster containing approximately 300,000 stars, located 25,000 light-years away. And it contained, encoded in binary, information about the biochemistry of life on Earth, information about our DNA, information about the human body, information about our solar system and our population and our technology. And the scientists who sent it were proud, and they should have been proud in the context of what they understood. But what they were actually doing in the context of the dark forest was standing at the edge of an incomprehensibly vast and dangerous forest and firing a flare directly into the darkest part of the trees, and then waiting to see what emerged. They won't tell you that in the textbooks. They will tell you about the achievement, about the ingenuity of the encoding, about the beautiful optimism of the gesture, and they will not linger on what Liu Cixin and the dark forest theorists would say about it, which is that it was an act of staggering, breathtaking, almost suicidal naivety. Not because the scientists were stupid, they were among the smartest humans alive, but because they were operating from the assumption that the universe is fundamentally kind, and the dark forest says that assumption is the most dangerous luxury an intelligent species can afford. Now I want to talk to you about something that I find genuinely, viscerally disturbing. Something that once I understood it, I found myself thinking about at odd moments, in the middle of conversations, while looking at the night sky through a window, while lying in the dark before sleep, because there is a particular cruelty in the physics of how an attack would arrive if the dark forest is real, and if something out there has decided that our noise has gone on long enough. And the cruelty is this: it would arrive at the speed of light, and we would see it at the exact same moment it hit us. We would have zero warning, zero time to respond, zero opportunity to do anything at all, because the weapon and the information about the weapon are traveling at the same speed, which means that the first indication that something was coming would be simultaneous with its arrival. The light from whatever was launched at us and the thing itself would reach us at the same moment. And in the time it took our instruments to register the anomaly and our scientists to interpret the data and our governments to formulate a response and our engineers to attempt anything at all, it would already be over. And I want you to hold that in your mind for a moment, not to frighten you beyond what is useful, but because understanding the nature of the threat is part of understanding why the shield of vastness, which we will reach together before this night is over, is so profound and so genuinely comforting. But we are not there yet, and before we get there, I need you to understand the full weight of what we have done. Most people who are listening to me tonight were born after the Apollo program, born into a world where space exploration was already part of the background of civilization, where the Voyager probes were already out there, where SETI was already listening, where the search for extraterrestrial intelligence was already a respectable, if somewhat fringe, scientific pursuit. And because of this, because all of it was already done before you arrived, you perhaps have never had the experience of hearing it for the first time, of encountering for the first time the information that your species has been broadcasting its existence to the galaxy for a century. And I want you to try to have that experience right now. I want you to imagine hearing it fresh. Imagine someone sitting you down and saying, "We have been sending radio signals into deep space for 100 years. We have sent golden records with maps to our exact location. We have sent targeted transmissions towards specific star clusters, and we have no idea what is out there, and we have no ability to detect whether anything that received our signals has responded by doing anything other than noting our location, and we have no defense against anything that might have decided that our existence represents a problem that needs to be solved." How does that make you feel, sitting there in the dark, knowing that for 100 years we have been the loudest thing in this corner of the galaxy, knowing that our electromagnetic signature is expanding outward right now as you lie in your bed, knowing that every television show ever broadcast is out there in the void, that the first season of I Love Lucy is currently 40 light years from Earth and still going, that our military radar from World War II is out there, that our nuclear tests generated electromagnetic pulses that escaped into space, that everything we are and everything we have been for the last century is written in electromagnetic radiation on the dark sky for anyone with the instruments to read it. Knowing all of that, knowing that we cannot call it back, knowing that what is done and the signals are out there and have been for decades, how do you feel? I feel something that I can only describe as cosmic vertigo, a feeling of the ground shifting beneath me, a feeling that the sky above me is not the protective canopy I have always unconsciously treated it as, but is instead a window, and outside the window is something I cannot see and cannot measure and cannot defend against, and the vertigo comes from the combination of scale and helplessness, the recognition that we are so small and so loud and so exposed, that we are like a child who has wandered away from the campfire and into the forest and started singing at the top of their lungs, completely unaware that the forest has things in it that were perfectly still and perfectly silent until the singing started. And now they are not still anymore. And I want to tell you something that the mainstream will not tell you. I want to tell you something that lives in the uncomfortable space between established science and genuine philosophical honesty, which is that some of the people who think most carefully about this some of the physicists and astronomers and mathematicians who have spent their careers studying the Fermi Paradox and its implications. Some of them have looked at the dark forest logic and have concluded that it is not obviously wrong, that the mathematics of it are sound, that the game theory of it is coherent, that the silence of the cosmos is at least consistent with it, and that the implications of it, if true, are serious enough that we should be having a very different conversation about how enthusiastically we broadcast our existence into the void than the conversation we are currently having. Stephen Hawking said it directly. He said it more than once. He said that if aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. And he argued explicitly against active SETI, against the deliberate transmission of signals designed to attract attention. And he was not a fool. He was arguably the most famous physicist of his generation. And he looked at the situation and arrived at a conclusion that sounds uncomfortably close to dark forest logic. The conclusion that contact with a more advanced civilization is not necessarily good news for the less advanced one. And he is not alone among serious scientists in thinking this. And yet the conversation continues, and the transmissions continue, and the bubble keeps expanding, and the forest stays silent. There is a thought experiment that I want to walk you through before we begin the descent into the part of tonight that will bring you peace, the part that I genuinely love, the part that I think about when the weight of the dark forest gets too heavy in the quiet hours. And the thought experiment is this. Imagine you are on a game show, and the game show has one rule. You are in a room with 100 other contestants, and once every minute, someone in the room will be eliminated, and the elimination is permanent, and you do not know who will be eliminated or how the eliminations are decided. But you do know that the last person standing wins something extraordinary, wins survival, wins continuation, wins everything. Now imagine that in this room, some of the other contestants have been there for millions of minutes. Some of them have been playing this game for so long they barely remember anything before it. And they have survived not because they are lucky, but because they have gotten very, very good at the game. They have developed strategies. They have developed instincts. They have developed a certain ruthlessness. The people who have been in the game for only 100 minutes simply do not possess. And now imagine that you have just walked into this room, 100 minutes old, and you have immediately started announcing yourself, started waving your arms and shouting your name and broadcasting your location and inviting everyone to come find you. And the people who have been there for millions of minutes are watching you do this with an expression that you cannot quite read. And I want you to think about what that expression means. I want you to think about what the people who have been in that room the longest, who have survived the longest, who have seen the most eliminations. I want you to think about what they know that you don't. And I want you to think about what they are going to do about the noise you are making. This is humanity's position in the cosmos tonight. This is where we are. 100-minute-old contestant in a room full of million-minute survivors, waving our arms and shouting our name with the innocent enthusiasm of someone who has not yet understood the rules of the game they are playing. And I tell you this not to leave you in the pit of it, because we have much further to travel tonight, and the destination is genuinely surprisingly, deeply peaceful. I tell you this because the fear is necessary, because the fear is the thing that makes the comfort real, because you cannot fully appreciate the shield until you have fully felt the exposure. And so I'm asking you to sit with the exposure for just a little longer, to really feel the weight of 100 years of noise, the weight of 2 golden records and an Arecibo message, and a century of radio and television and radar spreading outward through the aphotic void in an ever-expanding sphere of unmistakable, undeniable, unretractable evidence of our existence. And then, when you have felt the full weight of it, when you have let yourself understand what we have done and what the dark forest says about what we have done, then I am going to show you why you are still here, why we are still here, why the forest has not found us yet, and why the same physics that makes the dark forest so terrifying also wraps us in a protection so profound and so vast that the universe itself becomes not a source of dread, but a blanket, a deep and ancient and incomprehensibly large blanket, pulling gently over you in the dark. And soon, very soon, we are going to rest. Stay with me now, because we are about to turn a corner, and I need you to feel the turn as we make it. Need you to notice the moment when the weight begins to shift, when the thing that has been pressing down on your chest since we first walked into this forest begins, slowly, almost imperceptibly, to lift, because that moment is coming. It is close, but before it arrives, I want to do one final thing with the darkness. I want to sit in it with you for just a little longer, not to frighten you further, not to add anything to the weight you are already carrying from everything we have discussed tonight, but because there is something in the full experience of the darkness that I think is important, something that you need to feel completely before the comfort I'm about to give you can land the way it deserves to land. And that something is this: the recognition that you are small, genuinely, cosmically, almost incomprehensibly small, and that this smallness, this quality that has always felt like vulnerability, this quality that the darkness of the universe seems designed to emphasize, is about to reveal itself as the most extraordinary stroke of luck in the history of our species. Let me tell you about the Milky Way, not the way the textbooks tell you about it, not with diagrams and statistics and the careful neutral language of scientific documentation, but the way I think about it in the quiet hours, the way it feels when you really let the scale of it land on you without flinching. The Milky Way is a barred spiral galaxy approximately 100,000 light-years across, which means that light traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second, the fastest anything in the universe can move, takes 100,000 years to cross it from edge to edge, and if you tried to drive across it in a car going highway speed, a car going 100 kilometers per hour, it would take you approximately 1 billion years, and the Milky Way contains somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars, and it is one of an estimated 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. And within the Milky Way, our solar system is located in a relatively sparse, relatively quiet region called the Orion Arm, sometimes called the Orion Spur, which is a minor spiral arm, not one of the grand sweeping major arms where star formation is dense and energetic and active, but a quieter, more peripheral region situated roughly 26,000 light-years from the galactic center, which is about halfway between the center and the outer edge, tucked away in the galactic suburbs, in a neighborhood that is by cosmic standards remarkably calm and unremarkable and easy to overlook. And I want you to hold that image, the image of our solar system in its quiet corner of a minor arm of an average galaxy. Hold it in your mind as we move forward, because that image is the beginning of your comfort. Now I want to talk to you about the radio bubble, the sphere of electromagnetic noise that our civilization has been generating for the last 100 years. The bubble that we discussed earlier as the evidence of our exposure, the thing that has been expanding outward into the void and advertising our existence to anything with the instruments to detect it. Because I want to give you the number, the actual number, the number that when I first encountered it made me sit back and breathe for a moment with something that felt almost like relief. And the number is this: our radio bubble is approximately 200 light years across, which sounds enormous until you place it against the scale of the Milky Way, until you remember that the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across, until you do the mathematics and realize that our radio bubble represents roughly 0.2% of the diameter of our galaxy, that if you shrank the Milky Way to the size of a continent the size of North America, our radio bubble would be roughly the size of a tennis ball, sitting somewhere in the middle of it. And that tennis ball is our entire electromagnetic presence in the cosmos. That tennis ball is 100 years of radio and television and radar and military communications and golden records. That tennis ball is everything we have ever broadcast into the void, and it is sitting in the middle of a continent, in a quiet suburb, in a neighborhood that was already unremarkable before we started making noise. But there is more, because the size of the bubble is only part of the story, because what matters in the dark forest is not just whether your signal reaches something, but whether it is detectable when it arrives. And here is something that the mainstream coverage of our cosmic exposure consistently underemphasizes, something that the headlines about SETI and interstellar communication rarely pause to explain, and it is this: electromagnetic signals degrade, they spread, they attenuate, they thin out as they travel, following what physicists call the inverse square law, which means that the intensity of the signal decreases in proportion to the square of the distance it has traveled, which means that a signal that is a certain strength at 1 light year is 1/4 that strength at 2 light years, and 1/9 that strength at 3 light years, and 1/100th that strength at 10 light years. And by the time our television broadcasts and radio signals have traveled even a few dozen light years, they have thinned to such an extent that they are essentially indistinguishable from the background electromagnetic noise of the cosmos, from the random crackle and hiss of the universe itself. And detecting them against that background would require not just advanced technology, but technology of a specificity and sensitivity that we ourselves do not yet possess. Technology aimed deliberately at our specific location, looking for us specifically, already knowing roughly where to look, and even then the signal would be extraordinarily faint, a whisper in a hurricane, a candle at the edge of a continent. This does not mean we are perfectly hidden, and I want to be honest with you about that, because I promised you honesty tonight, and I intend to keep that promise. The Arecibo Message and the Voyager Golden Records were specifically designed to be detectable at interstellar distances, designed with the explicit purpose of being found, and a sufficiently advanced civilization with instruments we cannot imagine might be able to detect our signals at distances far greater than our own technology could manage. But here is the thing. Here is the piece that matters. Here is the piece that begins to transform the terror into something else. The universe is not uniformly populated with civilizations pointing their instruments at our specific location. The dark forest hunters, if they exist, are not omniscient. They cannot watch everywhere at once. They are themselves constrained by physics, by the speed of light, by the finite reach of their instruments, by the sheer incomprehensible size of the galaxy they inhabit, and our quiet suburban corner of the Orion Arm is not, by any reasonable assessment, the most likely place to be looking. Think about it this way. Think about the galactic center, the dense, energetic, violently active region around the supermassive black hole at the heart of the Milky Way, where stars are packed so closely together that stellar collisions are not uncommon, where gamma-ray bursts and supernova and the intense radiation of 1 billion compressed stellar bodies make the environment extraordinarily hostile to life as we understand it. And think about the major spiral arms, the grand sweeping structures where star formation is active and intense, and the density of stellar bodies is vastly higher than in our quiet spur. And now, think about the attention of any civilization sophisticated enough to be hunting in the dark forest. Think about where that attention would naturally be directed: toward the dense regions, toward the active regions, toward the areas where the probability of finding another civilization is highest, toward the galactic center and the major arms where civilizations would be most likely to develop and where their signals would be strongest and most numerous. And then think about our little tennis ball of electromagnetic noise sitting in its quiet suburb in a minor arm, halfway to the galactic edge, in the kind of neighborhood that even a cosmic predator might reasonably overlook in favor of richer hunting grounds. We are not just small. We are small in the right place. And now I want to talk to you about time, because the dark forest is not just a spatial phenomenon, it is a temporal one, and the time dimension of our situation contains a comfort that I find almost unbearably beautiful when I let myself really feel it. Because consider this, the signals we have been generating for 100 years are traveling at the speed of light, and the nearest star to our own, Proxima Centauri, is 4.2 light-years away, which means our signals have only been reaching that nearest neighbor for about 95 years, and Proxima Centauri does not appear to host any technological civilization, and the nearest stars beyond it are 5, 6, 7, 8 light-years away. And even at the speed of light, even traveling at the maximum velocity that physics permits, our signals have only been reaching the stars within a 100 light-year bubble for about a century. And within that bubble, that tennis ball in the continent, the number of stellar systems that could conceivably host a civilization advanced enough to detect our signals and respond is not zero, but it is not large. And here is the part that I find most quietly comforting of all. Even if something within our radio bubble detected our signals the moment they arrived, even if it identified them immediately as the product of an intelligent civilization and made an immediate decision about what to do, the fastest any response could reach us, the fastest any physical consequence could travel from there to here, is at the speed of light, which means it would take years or decades to arrive. And in that time, in those years and decades, we would have the opportunity to become something other than what we are, to develop technologies and capabilities that do not yet exist, to become harder to find and harder to harm, to maybe, just maybe, become the kind of civilization that has earned its place in the dark forest, not as prey, but as something else entirely. But I want to go deeper than strategy. I want to go deeper than the physics and the mathematics, because I think there is something in the structure of the universe itself that deserves to be felt tonight. Something in the relationship between scale and safety that goes beyond the merely tactical. Something that when you really let it in, changes not just how you think about the darkness above you, but how you feel about it. And what I want to say is this: the same thing that makes the cosmos so terrifying, the same quality that creates the dark forest in the first place, the sheer incomprehensible vastness of it, the distances so large that light takes millions of years to cross them, the voids between galaxies so enormous that they make our entire galaxy look like a dust mote, the scale so far beyond human intuition that every attempt to truly grasp it leaves the mind slightly dazed and humbled. That vastness, that terrifying, awe-inducing, vertigo-producing vastness is also our protection, is also our shield, is also the reason that on this night, in this moment, you are lying in your bed, breathing the air of a planet that is still here, still intact, still spinning peacefully through the dark at exactly the right distance from its star, still wrapped in its atmosphere like a blanket, still full of life and noise and complexity, and the extraordinary, improbable, precious fact of your own existence. The void is not just the threat. The void is the moat. I want you to feel that. Feel it the way you feel warmth. Feel it the way you feel the weight of a blanket settling over you in the dark. Because what I am describing is real. It is physics. It is the actual structure of the universe we inhabit. And the physics says this: the nearest star is 4 light years away, and the nearest likely candidate for a technological civilization is probably tens or hundreds of light years away. And the distances between stars are not just large in the way that the distance between cities is large. They are large in a way that makes the distance between cities seem like the distance between your hand and your face. They are large in a way that no engine we have ever built and no engine we can currently imagine building could traverse in a human lifetime. And this means that we are not just hidden by our smallness and our quiet suburban location. We are protected by the fundamental structure of space-time itself, by the fact that the universe is mostly nothing, mostly void, mostly the tenebrous emptiness between things, and that emptiness is not our enemy. That emptiness is our guardian. That emptiness has been sitting between us and everything else in the cosmos for the entire history of our species, patient and vast and absolute, and it will continue to sit there tonight while you sleep. Let me paint you a picture of where we are. A picture not of terror, but of something approaching wonder, because I think we have earned it. I think we have looked at the darkness long enough tonight to have the right to look at the light. And the picture is this. Imagine the Milky Way as a vast disk of light and dark, 100,000 light years across, a slowly rotating spiral of stars and dust and gas, and the dark matter that holds it all together. And somewhere in that disk, roughly halfway between the center and the edge, In a quiet minor arm called the Orion Spur, there is a star, a yellow dwarf star of perfectly average size and perfectly average brightness, unremarkable in every way that matters for being noticed, and orbiting that star at a distance of approximately 150 million kilometers is a small blue planet, a planet covered in liquid water and wrapped in a thin skin of nitrogen and oxygen. And on that planet, in the last 100th of a second of cosmic time, a species of upright primates developed the ability to think and speak and wonder and build. And they looked up at the stars and felt something that no other species on their planet had ever felt. The specific ache of wanting to know what is out there, the specific longing to reach across the void and touch something other than themselves. And they built instruments and sent messages and dreamed of contact and stared into the dark with the particular mixture of hope and fear and wonder that is one of the most beautiful things about being human. And they are there right now on that small blue planet in the quiet part of the minor arm, going about their lives in the way that humans do, sleeping and waking and loving and worrying and making their coffee and driving their familiar routes and lying in their beds at night listening to a voice in the dark. And the universe around them is vast and ancient and largely silent. And the silence is not just a warning, it is also a mercy. Because the same distances that might keep the hunters away also keep us safe. And the same void that separates us from whatever is out there also separates whatever is out there from us. There is a specific quality to the comfort I am describing that I want to make sure you feel correctly, because it is not the comfort of certainty. It is not the comfort of knowing for sure that we are safe. And I will not insult your intelligence by offering you that, because we cannot know for sure. Because the dark forest is a theory and not a proven fact, and the universe is under no obligation to tell us its secrets on a schedule that is convenient for our anxiety. And so the comfort I am offering you tonight is something more honest than certainty, and in many ways more durable. It is the comfort of proportion, the comfort of understanding that the scale of the threat and the scale of the protection are both so vast as to be essentially equal, that the darkness that might contain hunters also contains a void so immense that crossing it is not a trivial matter, even for the most advanced civilization we can imagine, that the light years between us and whatever else might be out there are not nothing, are not a minor inconvenience to be casually dismissed, are in fact one of the most formidable barriers in the known universe, a barrier made not of walls or weapons or technology, but of the fundamental geometry of space itself. And that barrier is tonight doing what it has always done, what it was doing before the first human being looked up at the stars, what it will continue to do long after we have found our answers or our answers have found us. It is sitting between us and the dark, vast and patient and absolute, and it is keeping us here. I want you to take a breath now, a slow one, the kind of breath you take when you have been holding tension in your body without realizing it, and then someone points it out and you finally let it go. Because we have been in the dark for a long time tonight. You and I. We have walked through the terrifying architecture of the dark forest together. We have looked at the chain of suspicion and the technological explosion and the horrifying logic of preemptive annihilation. We have sat with the weight of 100 years of noise and the exposure of our golden records and our Arecibo Message, and our century of television signals spreading outward into the void, we have felt the full weight of our smallness and our loudness and our innocence. And now I want to begin the long, slow walk back towards something that feels like rest, because rest is what you came here for tonight. Rest is what you deserve, and the path to it runs directly through the center of everything we have been discussing. Because the thing about the dark forest that the mainstream misses, the thing that gets lost in the headlines and the science fiction and the breathless coverage of SETI results, is that it contains within itself, embedded in its very structure, the seed of something that is not terror but peace. Think about the silence again, but think about it differently now. Think about it not as the silence of hunters waiting to strike, but as the silence of distance, the silence of light years, the silence of a void so immense that even at the speed of light, a message takes centuries or millennia to cross it. Think about the silence as the sound of space doing what space does, which is to separate things, to place between them a buffer so vast that the universe feels not like a crowded room full of armed hunters, but like a wilderness so large that the hunters, even if they exist, even if they are exactly what the dark forest says they are separated from us by distances that make the word far seem almost comically inadequate. Distances that our radio bubble has barely begun to touch in 100 years of shouting. Distances that reduce our electromagnetic presence to something that might, from far enough away, look like nothing at all, like the random noise of a star, like background, like the cosmic static that fills the universe in every direction and means nothing to anyone looking for something specific in a very large dark place. And there is something else, something I have been saving for this moment, something that I think deserves to be heard in the quiet that is beginning to settle over everything now, in the gradual slowing of the pace, in the softening of the edges of the fear. And it is this: we are here, which means something important, because the dark forest, if it is real, has been operating for billions of years, has been operating since the first civilizations developed in the early universe, has been the governing logic of cosmic survival for a time so vast that our entire history is too small to see against it. And yet, here we are, on our small blue planet, in our quiet corner of the minor arm, alive, intact, looking up at the stars and wondering about them, which means that whatever the dark forest is, whatever the truth of the cosmic silence turns out to be, it has not found us yet. It has not reached us yet. It has not decided that the noise from our little tennis ball of electromagnetic static is worth the immense expenditure of energy and time and resources that eliminating us would require. And every night that passes, every morning you wake up to a sky that is still blue and a sun that still rises and a world that is still here, is evidence that the shield of vastness is doing its job, that the void between us and whatever else exists is fulfilling its ancient, silent, unglamorous, utterly reliable function of keeping us safe. Let the weight go now. I mean that as literally as I have ever meant anything. In all the nights we have spent together in this particular darkness, I mean for you to actually feel the muscles in your body release, the ones across your shoulders and the ones along your jaw and the ones you did not even know were holding tension until this moment, the ones that have been gripping quietly all through our journey into the forest and are only now beginning to understand that the journey is turning, that we are not going deeper anymore, that the path beneath us is beginning, slowly and gently, to lead back toward the light, or not toward the light exactly, because the light is not what we need right now. What we need is something softer than light, something older than light, something that was here before the first star ignited in the primordial dark and will be here after the last one fades. What we need is the deep, the still, the ancient quiet of a universe that is mostly nothing, mostly peace, mostly the vast and patient silence of space, doing what space has always done, holding everything gently apart from everything else, keeping the distances, maintaining the void, wrapping each small lit thing in an immensity of dark that is not hostile, but is simply enormous, simply itself, simply the nature of a cosmos that is far more interested in existing than in ending anything. I have been thinking about you tonight, specifically about you, lying in whatever position you have settled into for the night, in whatever corner of the world your bed is situated, under whatever sky is currently turning slowly above your roof. And I have been thinking about what it means that you chose to spend these hours with me, walking through one of the most genuinely vertiginous ideas in all of human thought. And what I keep coming back to is that the choice to look at something frightening and keep looking, the choice to follow the darkness all the way to its end rather than turning back when it gets uncomfortable, that choice is one of the most particularly human things I can imagine. It is the same impulse that made the first humans look up at the stars and want to name them. The same impulse that sent Voyager out into the void with its golden record. The same impulse that built the Arecibo dish in a mountain valley in Puerto Rico and aimed it at a star cluster 25,000 light years away and fired a message into the dark. The impulse to know, to reach, to not look away. And I think that impulse, whatever its consequences in the dark forest, is something precious, something worth honoring, something that deserves to rest now, to be carried gently into sleep and held there in the warm dark of your own dreaming mind until morning comes and the sky is blue again. Let me tell you one more thing about the void, one final thing before we surrender completely to the drift, and it is this. The void is not empty, not really, not in the way that empty usually means, because space is threaded through with light, with the ancient photons of the cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, light that is 13.8 billion years old, light that has been traveling since before the first stars formed, light that fills the entire universe uniformly and gently in every direction, a soft and ancient luminescence that you cannot see with your eyes, but that is nevertheless there, has always been there, will always be there, wrapping everything in the universe in a warmth so old it predates everything that has ever lived. And I think about that light sometimes when the darkness of the dark forest gets too heavy. I think about the fact that we are bathed in 13 billion-year-old light right now, that it is passing through us and around us and between us, that the universe is not a cold and hostile void, but is in fact suffused with this ancient warmth, this fossil light of the first moment, and it makes the darkness feel less like absence and more like presence, less like nothing and more like everything that has ever been, compressed and stretched and thinned across the incomprehensible distances of cosmic time into something too subtle for our instruments, but not, I think, too subtle for something in us that is older than our instruments, something that was reading the temperature of the universe long before we had words for what it was doing. The dark forest is real, or it might be real, or something like it might be true, and the silence of the cosmos might be a warning, and we have been making noise when we should perhaps have been quiet, and all of that is genuinely, verifiably, philosophically serious, and I am not going to take it back or soften it now that we have come this far together, because you came here for the truth, and the truth is complicated, and the truth does not always resolve into something comfortable. But here is what I know. Here is what the physics gives us with a certainty that the philosophy cannot. Here is what is real regardless of whether the dark forest is true or not. The distance between us and the nearest star is 4.2 light years, and the distance between us and anything that might have heard our oldest broadcasts is measured in decades of light travel, and the distance between us and the civilizations that would be old enough and powerful enough to be the apex predators of the dark forest is measured in thousands or millions of light years, and those distances are not metaphors, they are not reassurances, they are not someone telling you not to worry, they are the actual geometry of the universe we live in. They are the physical reality of our situation, and that physical reality contains within it a buffer so vast, a moat so wide, a silence so deep and so old that it has been protecting us without our knowledge or our gratitude for the entire history of our species. We have been safe in the dark for a very long time. We are safe in the dark tonight. I want you to let the scale work for you now, instead of against you, because all night the scale has been the source of the dread. The incomprehensible vastness of the cosmos has been the thing that made the dark forest feel so overwhelming, the thing that made our smallness feel like exposure. And now I want to flip it. I want you to feel the vastness as what it actually is from the perspective of your safety, which is protection, which is insulation, which is the universe placing between you and everything that might mean you harm a distance so enormous that the word enormous is embarrassed to be associated with it. A distance that makes the Pacific Ocean look like a puddle and makes the span of human history look like a heartbeat. A distance that even at the speed of light takes years and centuries and millennia to cross. A distance that is doing its work right now, silently and reliably and without any effort from us. The way the deep earth beneath your house does its work, holding you up without asking for anything, without requiring your attention or your gratitude, simply being what it is, which is the ground beneath your feet, which is the thing between you and the falling. The universe is 100 light years of radio bubble and 93 billion light years of observable space. And in that ratio, in that almost incomprehensible ratio, there is a piece that I have been trying to find the right words for all night. A piece that is not the piece of knowing you are safe, but the piece of understanding that the danger and the distance are in the same proportion, that the dark forest and the void between its trees are made of the same stuff, that the hunters and the distances they would have to cross are equally real, equally physical, equally subject to the same laws of the universe that govern everything. And those laws say that nothing travels faster than light, And those laws say that the nearest likely threat is years of light travel away. And those laws say that our signals have only reached a tiny fraction of a tiny fraction of our galaxy. And those laws have been in place for 13.8 billion years and show no signs of changing tonight. You are lying in the dark on a small blue planet in a quiet corner of an average galaxy in a universe so vast that our entire civilization's electromagnetic presence is a tennis ball in a continent, and the continent is mostly empty, and the night above you is the same night it has always been, full of the same ancient light from the same ancient stars, and the silence of it is not the silence of hunters, it is the silence of distance, it is the silence of light years, it is the silence of space being what space has always been, which is mostly nothing, mostly peace, mostly the deep and patient dark that holds everything gently and keeps the distances and lets the small lit things continue to exist in their quiet corners, continuing to breathe, continuing to wonder, continuing to look up at the stars and feel that specific human ache of wanting to know what is out there. We are tucked away, you and I, tucked away in the galactic suburbs in a quiet spur of a minor arm, far from the dense and active center where the energy is highest and the attention of any cosmic predator would most naturally be drawn, far from the major arms where civilizations would be most likely to develop and most likely to be looking, sitting in our little pocket of relative calm with our 100-year-old radio bubble barely scratching the surface of the space around us, our signals already thinning to background noise before they have traveled even a fraction of the distance to anything that might be sophisticated enough to be dangerous. And the void around us is doing what the void has always done, which is to be vast, to be patient, to be indifferent in the most protective possible way, to place between us and everything else in the universe a distance so absolute that it functions as the most reliable shield our species has ever had, a shield we did not build and do not maintain and will never be able to improve upon, because it is simply the nature of the space we inhabit, the geometry of our situation, the physics of a universe that is mostly nothing and has been mostly nothing since before the Earth formed. And now I want to talk to you about sleep, about this specific sleep, the sleep you are about to have after a night of walking through the darkest idea in human cosmology, because I think this sleep is going to be different from your usual sleep. I think it is going to be deeper, and I want to tell you why. I want to tell you what I believe about the particular quality of rest that comes after you have looked at something genuinely frightening and kept looking until you found what was on the other side of it. Because there is something on the other side of every real darkness. There is always something on the other side. And what is on the other side of the dark forest, what we found together tonight at the end of the long walk through the trees, is not safety in the simple sense, not the safety of a locked door or a guaranteed future, but something older and in some ways more reliable than either of those things, the safety of scale, the safety of distance, the safety of a universe that is so large that even its dangers are separated from us by distances that make the word vast seem almost quaint. And that safety, that ancient and physics-grounded and fundamentally real safety, is what you get to carry into sleep with you tonight. Let the breath slow now. Let it find its own rhythm, the rhythm it knows without being told, the rhythm it falls into when the thinking stops and the body takes over and the ancient machinery of rest begins to do what it has been doing since the first creatures on this planet closed their eyes in the dark and trusted that the morning would come. And it always has. The morning has always come. For 4 billion years, the morning has come to this planet, rising over whatever was here before us, over the dinosaurs, and before them, the great forests of the Carboniferous, and before them, the shallow seas, and before them, the bare rock and the cooling crust, and the ancient cooling silence of a young planet finding its temperature. And through all of it, the morning came, reliable and indifferent and warm, and it will come tomorrow. And the night between now and then is just the dark, just the ordinary dark, just the same dark that has covered this planet every night for 4 billion years. The same dark that kept everything alive through every night it has ever covered. The same dark that is, when you are small enough and quiet enough and distant enough in the right ways, not a threat, but a blanket. The stars above your roof right now are the same stars that were there last night, and the night before, and the night before that, burning at exactly the same distances they have always burned, the light from them taking the same years and decades and centuries to reach your eyes that it has always taken. And in those distances, in those light years of empty space between you and them, the same void is doing the same work it has always done, holding the distances, keeping the silence, placing between you and everything else in the universe the incomprehensible buffer of space itself. And the radio bubble is still expanding. Your tennis ball in the continent is still growing at the speed of light in every direction. And even so, you are still here, still breathing, still listening to my voice in the dark, still on your small blue planet, in your quiet corner of the minor arm. And the night is soft around you, the way night is always soft when you stop being afraid of it and let it be what it actually is, which is just the absence of local light, just the earth turned away from the sun for a few hours, just the ordinary rhythm of a planet doing what planets do. And you are inside that rhythm. You are part of it. You are as much a product of this planet and this star and this quiet corner of the galaxy as the stones and the oceans and the ancient sediment that holds the fossils of everything that lived here before us and trusted the night and woke in the morning and trusted the night again. I want you to let the dark forest go now, not because it is not real, not because the questions it raises are not serious, but because you have looked at it fully tonight. You have not turned away. You have followed the logic all the way to its end, and then followed the physics all the way to the protection that the end reveals. And that is enough for one night. That is more than enough. And the forest will still be there if you want to return to it. The questions will still be there. The silence of the cosmos will still be there to wonder about on some other night when the wondering feels productive rather than exhausting. But tonight, you have done the work. Tonight, you have earned the rest. And the rest is here now, settling over you the way the void settles over everything, gently and completely, and without asking anything from you, just covering you in the deep and the dark and the soft and the still, the ancient quiet of a universe that is mostly peace, mostly distance, mostly the patient nothing between things that keeps each small lit thing in its place, burning at its own temperature, in its own corner of the dark, safe in its own particular vastness, The Voyager probes are still out there, both of them moving through the interstellar medium beyond the edge of our solar system, carrying their golden records into the dark. And the records are intact, and the maps are still readable, and the music is still there. Bach and Beethoven and Chuck Berry and Blind Willie Johnson, and the brainwaves of a woman in love, and the sounds of surf and wind and rain and thunder, and the voices of 55 human languages all saying hello into the void. And those probes are moving at 40,000 kilometers per hour, which sounds fast until you consider that the nearest star is 4.2 light years away, and at that speed, it would take Voyager 73,000 years to reach it. And in those 73,000 years, in that immense and patient span of time, the universe will continue to be what it is, vast and mostly empty and threaded through with ancient light and held in the geometry of distances so large they function as protection. And our small blue planet will continue to spin in its quiet corner, morning following night, following morning following night. And the people on it will continue to breathe and sleep and wake and look up at the stars and feel that specific human ache of wanting to know. And the stars will continue to burn at their ancient distances, and the void will continue to do its quiet work, and the silence of the cosmos will continue to be whatever it is, warning or mercy, or simply the sound of a universe too large to be anything but mostly nothing. And none of that requires anything from you tonight. None of that needs your vigilance or your anxiety or your open eyes. All of it will continue exactly as it has always continued, without you having to hold it in place, without you having to keep watch, without you having to do anything at all except let the breath slow and the body settle and the thinking mind release its grip on the questions it has been holding all night and allow itself to drift, to soften, to follow the ancient signal of the tired body down into the deep, where the questions don't live, where only the warmth lives, the warmth and the dark and the slow rhythmic fact of being alive on this small and improbable and fiercely beautiful planet that has kept every living thing that has ever trusted its nights alive to see the morning. We are here. We are small. We are quiet in the right ways. The void is vast in the right ways. The forest is dark, but it is also deep and wide and mostly empty, and the distances in it are almost beyond imagining. And those distances are ours tonight. They belong to us. They are on our side. They are the universe's gift to every small lit thing that needs the night to last just a little longer before the questions come back. Let the night last. Let it be deep. Let the breath go slow. Let the dark be what it is, which is soft, which is ancient, which is the same dark that covered the first creatures that ever slept on this planet and kept them safe until morning. The same dark that is covering you now, gentle and vast and full of the kind of silence that is not emptiness but distance, not absence but space, not danger but the incomprehensible, reliable, physics-grounded, 4 billion year tested protection of a universe that keeps its small lit things separated by distances so large they become something very close to peace. You are 4 light years from the nearest star. You are 26,000 light years from the galactic center. You are in a quiet corner of a minor arm of an average galaxy in a universe so vast that our entire electromagnetic presence is invisible against the background of it. You are safe in the oldest way anything has ever been safe, which is to say, you are small, and the dark around you is large, and the distances are doing their work, and the morning will come. Sleep now. The forest is dark, and it is deep, and it is ancient, and it is quiet, and so are you. Good night.